fit for slaves. An attempt was made to take Ardea by storm, and that not succeeding, he adopted the plan of distressing the enemy by a blockade and works erected round them. In this fixed post, as is generally the case when the operations of war are rather tedious than vigorous, leave of absence was readily granted, and to the principal officers more readily than to the soldiers. The young men of the royal family in particular frequently passed their leisure time in feasting and entertainments. It happened that while these were drinking together at the quarters of Sextus Tarquinius, where Collatinus Tarquinius, the son of Egerius, also supped, mention was made of their wives. Each extolled his own to the skies. On this a dispute arising, Collatinus told them that there was no need of words, it could easily be known in a few hours how much his Lucretia excelled the rest. We are young and strong. Let us mount our horses and inspect in person the behaviour of our wives. That must be the most unexceptionable proof which meets our eyes on the unexpected arrival of the husband. They were heated with wine. Agreed, was the word. At full speed they fly to Rome. Having arrived there at the first dusk of the evening, they proceeded thence to Calatia, where they found Lucretia, not like the king's daughters-in-law, whom they had seen spending their time in luxurious entertainments among those of their own rank, but busily employed with her wool, though at that late hour, and sitting in the middle of the house, with her maids at work around her. The honour of superiority among the ladies mentioned in the dispute was, of course, acknowledged to belong to Lucretia. Her husband, on his arrival, and the Tarquinii were kindly received, and the husband, exulting in his victory, gave the royal youths a friendly invitation. There Sextus Tarquinius, instigated by brutal lust, formed a design of violating Lucretia's chastity by force, both her beauty and her approved modesty serving as incentives. After this youthful frolic of the night, they returned to the camp. A few days after, Sextus Tarquinius, without the knowledge of Collatinus, went to Calatia, with only a single attendant. He was kindly received by the family, who suspected not his design, and, after supper, conducted to the chamber where guests were lodged. Then, burning with desire, as soon as he thought that everything was safe and the family all at rest, he came with his sword drawn to Lucretia, where she lay asleep, and holding her down, with his left hand pressed on her breast, said, "Lucretia, be silent. I am Sextus Tarquinius. My sword is in my hand. If you utter a word, you die." Terrified at being thus disturbed from sleep, she saw no assistance near, and immediate death threatening her. Tarquinius then acknowledged his passion, entreated, mixed threats with entreaties, and used every argument likely to have effect on a woman's mind. But finding her inflexible and not to be moved even by the fear of death, he added to that fear the dread of dishonour, telling her that after killing her he would murder a slave and lay him naked by her side, that she might be said to have been slain in base adultery. The shocking apprehensions conveyed by this menace overpowering her resolution in defending her chastity, his lust became victorious, and Tarquinius departed, applauding himself for this triumph over a lady's honour. But Lucretia, plunged by such a disaster into the deepest distress, dispatched a messenger to Rome to her father, with orders to proceed to Ardea to her husband, and to desire them to come to her, each with one faithful friend, to tell them that there was a necessity for their doing so, and speedily, for that a dreadful affair had happened. Spurius Lucretius came with Publius Valerius, the son of Volesus, Collatinus with Lucius Junius Brutus, in company with whom he chanced to be returning to Rome, when he was met by his wife's messenger. They found Lucretia sitting in her chamber, melancholy and dejected. On the arrival of her friends she burst into tears, and on her husband's asking, "Is all well?" "Far from it," said she, For how can it be well with a woman who has lost her chastity? Collatinus, the impression of another man is in your bed. Yet my person only has been violated. My mind is guiltless, as my death will testify. But give me your right hands, and pledge your honour that the adulterer shall not escape unpunished. He is Sixtus Tarquinius, who, under the appearance of a guest, disguising as an enemy, obtained here last night, by armed violence, a triumph deadly to me, and to himself also, if he be man. They all pledged their honour, one after another, and endeavoured to comfort her distracted mind, acquitting her of blame, as under the compulsion of force, and charging it on the violent perpetrator of the crime, told her that the mind alone was capable of sinning, not the body, and that where there was no such intention, there could be no guilt. It is your concern, said she, to consider what is due to him. As to me, though I acquit myself of the guilt, I cannot dispense with the penalty, nor shall any woman ever plead the example of Lucretia for surviving her chastity. Thus saying, she plunged into her heart a knife, which she had concealed under her garment, and falling forward on the wound, dropped lifeless. The husband and father shrieked aloud. But Brutus, while they were overpowered by grief, drawing the knife from the wound of Lucretia, and holding it out, reeking with blood before him, said, By this blood, most chaste until injured by royal insolence, I swear, and call you, O ye gods, to witness, that I will prosecute to destruction, by sword, fire, and every forcible means in my power, both Lucius Tarquinius the proud, and his impious wife, together with their entire race, and never will suffer one of them, nor any other person whatsoever, to be king in Rome. He then delivered the knife to Collatinus, afterwards to Lucretius and Valerius, who were filled with amazement, as at a prodigy, and at a loss to account for this unusual elevation of sentiment in the mind of Brutus. However, they took the oath as directed, and converting their grief into rage, followed Brutus, who put himself at their head and called on them to proceed instantly to abolish kingly power. They brought out the body of Lucretia from the house, conveyed it to the forum, and assembled the people, who came together quickly in astonishment, as may be supposed, at a deed so atrocious and unheard of. Every one exclaimed with vehemence against the villainy and violence of the prince. They were deeply affected by the grief of her father, and also by the discourse of Brutus, who rebuked their tears and ineffectual complaints, and advised them, as became men, as became Romans, to take up arms against those who had dared to treat them as enemies. The most spirited among the youth offered themselves with their arms, and the rest followed their example. On which, leaving half their number at the gates to defend Collatia, and fixing guards to prevent any intelligence of the commotion being carried to the princess, the rest, with Brutus at their head, marched to Rome. When they arrived there, the sight of such an armed multitude spread terror and confusion wherever they came. But in a little time, when people observed the principal men of the state marching at their head, they concluded that whatever the matter was, there must be good reason for it. Nor did the heinousness of the affair raise less violent emotions in the minds of the people at Rome than it had at Collatia, so that from all parts of the city they hurried into the forum, where, as soon as the party arrived, a crier summoned the people to attend the tribune of the Celeres, which office happened at that time to be held by Brutus. He there made a speech, no way consonant to that low degree of sensibility and capacity which until that day he had counterfeited, recounting the violence and lust of Sixtus Tarquinius, the shocking violation of Lucretia's chastity and her lamentable death, the misfortune of Tricipitinus in being left childless, who must feel the cause of his daughter's death as a greater injury and cruelty than her death itself. To these representations he added the pride of the king himself, the miseries and toils of the commons, buried underground to clean sinks and sewers, saying that the citizens of Rome, the conquerors of all the neighboring nations, were, from warriors, reduced to laborers and stone-cutters; mentioned the barbarous murder of King Servius Tullius, his abominable daughter driving in her carriage over the body of her father, and invoked the gods to avenge the cause of parents. By descanting on these and other, I suppose, more forcible topics, which the heinousness of present injuries suggests at the time, but which it is difficult for writers to repeat, he inflamed the rage of the multitude to such a degree that they were easily persuaded to deprive the king of his government, and to pass an order for the banishment of Lucius Tarquinius, his wife and children. Brutus himself, having collected and armed such of the young men as voluntarily gave in their names, set out for the camp at Ardea, in order to excite the troops there to take part against the king. The command in the city he left to Lucretius, who had some time before been appointed by the king to the office of prefect of the city. During this tumult Tullia fled from her house, both men and women, wherever she passed, imprecating curses on her head and invoking the Furies, the avengers of parents. News of these proceedings having reached the camp, and the king, alarmed at such extraordinary events, having begun his march towards Rome to suppress the commotions, Brutus, informed of his approach, turned into another road, in order to avoid a meeting, and very nearly at the same time, by different roads, Brutus arrived at Ardea, and Tarquinius at Rome. Tarquinius found the gates shut against him, and an order of banishment pronounced. The deliverer of the city was received in the camp with joy, and the king's sons were driven thence with disgrace. 2 of these followed their father, and went into exile at Cere among the Etrurians. Sextus Tarquinius, having retired to Gabii as if to his own dominions, was slain by some persons who were glad of an opportunity of gratifying old animosities which he had excited there by his rapine and murders. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus reigned 25 years. The government of kings continued, from the building of the city to the establishment of its liberty, 244 years. After that, in an assembly of the centuries, held by the prefect of the city, were elected, conformably to a plan found in the commentaries of Servius Tullius, 2 magistrates, called consuls. These were Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. End of Book 1, Part 9.